Hey everyone, we are back with a new episode, and today's theme is emotional mastery. So this is coming in as a request from Shay. So thank you, Shay, for asking about this, asking me to go a little deeper on this topic. It's something I post about often, I talk about often. It's definitely something I'm actively working on in my own life. And I posted something recently specifically that said that emotional mastery, especially for women, is a superpower. That once you really rein in your emotionality as a woman, you really become untouchable. And, this is coming from obviously always my own life experience. I am in no way an emotional master. I am, however, I learned recently that I'm really low on like the neuroticism scale. So I think that helps some. I'm in like those 0 or 1 percentile low for that. So we all have our different perspectives. We all relate to emotional mastery in different ways. So of course, this will fit for some and not for others. But to me, emotional mastery happens, it really gets sharpened in relationships, in relational mastery. That relational mastery and emotional mastery are very much interconnected. And I say that because it's one thing to sit by yourself and do your energy work and clear your triggers and clear your wounds and address, the things that still kind of have a chokehold over your emotional state. And it's a totally different thing to step out and get into a relationship or even in conversation or wherever it is where you have another person present and that they could say anything or do anything. And then it's up to you to maintain your emotional stature. And I definitely learned this, more recently. As I've mentioned here, I did low-key 10 years of kind of cocoon phase. I mean, I was definitely in and out of it, but 3 to 4 solid years of being like on an island somewhere by myself, and did a lot of work there, obviously. And for the 10-year period, I was mostly single. I did some dating, but I definitely wasn't in like a serious relationship because it was very clear to me in my assignment that I really had work to do on my own. And so kind of coming back to that. And then in the past couple of years, I've been seeing someone more seriously. And it really helped me see where I still had practice, where I still had work to do. And I think that that's because, another person in your space and in your energy and witnessing you and, navigating you is such a different experience than when it's just you. Because I know, and I'm going to talk a lot about the woman experience here, because obviously men and women even experience emotionality very differently. And I don't even like to pretend like I know the man experience. I really only know the experience of the woman. So I'm going to lean that direction in this video. But for women, it is literally, we are literally hormonally programmed to fluctuate emotionally. And, week by week, different phases of the month, different phases of our cycle and where we're at and how, how we're showing up. That's like the undercurrent of our emotional state. And then on top of that is what's happening in life, where you are, your stress levels and everything else. So there are layers to this experience. There are layers to this conversation. And the truth is that you have to be keenly aware of yourself to even be aware of the emotional state that you're in, and then how that's affecting you in how you're relating to other people, or what you need from that, or what it's asking for from you. And I think all of those pieces are major master keys for mastering yourself emotionally, and especially as a woman, because we do change and shift and we're always kind of moving with the flow of our lives, and men too, but on a different cycle, in a much different way. And I think I would argue that women are probably more moody, so to speak, right? Like that our emotionality can switch a bit more quickly. And I think what we have to be aware of, and where emotional mastery comes in, is the awareness of your emotional state. And then the question of like, okay, is this something that needs to be fixed, or is there something here that wants to be addressed, or do I just need to be with where I'm at and let that be okay? And, I know for me, again, as even a healer or someone who does wellness work, there are days, of course, I go into work or I'm seeing clients and I'm like not in my fullest expression. And I have to learn how to meet that, right? You have to learn to flow with your experience. And sometimes even when I'm like kind of more quiet or in my sort of depths, as I call them, I come even more powerfully in my work, right? Like that I'm not even kind of in the conversational stage as much of things. So I'm going to like keep it kind of short, but all my energy is like foo, like super big and ready to go. So, there's not good or bad here. And I think when we take the pressure off of ourselves that certain emotional states are good and certain are bad, it allows us to be in our own humanity in a much different way, because we all feel the spectrum, right? Some to a certain degree more than others, but in some way we all feel sadness, and in some way we all feel joy, and in some way we all feel anger, and in some way we all feel bliss, right? Like we all have both ends of the spectrum. And so it's not to pretend like we don't ever feel one way or the other. It's simply to understand where you are and meet yourself where you are and recognize when something is being triggered and meeting that too. I think like really healthy relationships, and this is where in my most recent, situation really held the space for me, because he would let me be where I was. And even when I would feel something and kind of project it onto him, he wouldn't take it personal. He could see what was happening, and it did not even address it. He would just allow it. And it really helped me then to be able to be present with when I was doing that. And then I would have to check myself why. And I would be able to go into my own process in that just safe dynamic. And I think that's really important, again, especially as a woman with a man who can hold the space for your fluidity and fluctuations, and, that certain things will move you emotionally in a certain way, and that it is ultimately yours to explore, right? But if they can just hold the space to understand that that's kind of how we move as women, and not take it personally or not have to fight back, or just to kind of allow the emotion to come up. And then if you're really actively working on it yourself as a woman, then you can sit with that and recognize that it's happening. So there's a lot of layers to this. And again, a lot of it happens in real time. That's why it takes a certain level of self-awareness to have emotional mastery, because you have to recognize like, oh, this is coming up right now. This is not even I'm mad at this person for it, but it's really my own. And there's a lot of accountability, in this space that I know as women, we struggle with at times, because it's a lot easier to say this person bad and wrong. They've made me feel this way, when it's your own feelings. They are your own feelings. And I think that's the core of emotional mastery, especially for women, but really for all, that your emotional state is your own responsibility. And of course, it's going to be affected by different things, and certain people will make you feel certain ways. But anytime I hear someone say like, this person made me feel this way, I'm like, and I had to really clear that narrative out of my own storyline, because yes, they can say something that will conjure a certain emotional response from you, but the response is your own. The response is your own. So that's why emotional mastery, again, is founded on accountability. I'm going to give an example because this is present. So in this most recent dating situation I was in, he was very factual. He was very fact-based, and he would come with facts. And I see how he moves in the world, and people respond to facts any given way, right? But this is why we have to be aware of how we're responding, because a fact is a fact, right? So one thing we were talking about at some point was the statistics around divorced families and how the children do and all of these things. And I come from a divorced family, and also have had to myself just do a lot of work around making peace with that and being good with that. And also, though it was actually quite natural for me, because I have always said that I really never had very much of a negative experience coming from a divorced family. Like my parents killed it in how they handled it. Neither of them ever spoke poorly about the other. It was never a pit against one another, nothing like that. It was super cordial. I only saw them still interact in love. And it happened when I was 5. So it was, from one of my earliest memories, I think, was them telling me that they were splitting, and framed it like, you're going to get 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, 2 closets. And I'm like, let's go. I'm a little kid. I obviously don't really totally know what's happening, but that sounded good. And I was down, and it worked. It worked out for me. I literally went back and forth, Monday at mom, Tuesday at dad's, went like literally every day back and forth. And I think that contributes to my nomadic lifestyle now. So all in all, I didn't have I really can't say that it truly negatively impacted me very much. But here he comes with the statistics about how a lot of children in divorced households fare more poorly, maybe, than those who come from households that stay together. And as someone who comes from a divorced household, of course, I had a response to that, partly because I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I've done this work and I'm good. And like, what? My life should show that I made it, And so, but all of this is my own stuff, right? Like anything that I'm going to say from this space or trying to prove myself or defend divorced households or whatever it is, right? It's so silly when you think about it. But in the moment, I was feeling away. I'm like, I didn't want to hear the statistic, right? And I felt sort of personally attacked by it when it really obviously literally did not have anything to do with me, because I was the outlier in the study wherein I feel like I've fared pretty well. But I had to sit with the fact that he wasn't trying to hurt me. The statistic itself was not trying to hurt me, So anything that's happening here is my own. Any response I'm having, any emotions I'm having around it, any anger, as much as I wanted to be mad at him for calling forward this fact, it was all my own experience. And he obviously could see that and wasn't gonna meet me there, which was good and fine. And it worked out. And again, to me, that was exactly what I needed, because him just kind of okay, cool, do your thing. Let me realize it was my thing. It was totally my thing. What was coming up was my own residue around coming from an imperfect family, and how, I needed to prove to people that was somehow still okay. And all of that is just my own madness, right? My family was perfect exactly as it is. So no, statistics are not, it's exactly what I needed. And I have nothing to prove at all, because I'm just myself and I like myself. I know myself. And so, no statistic can reduce me from just being who I am. But again, none of that had anything to do with him at all. It was all my own stuff. And so the emotional mastery in the moment was feeling, hey, what am I feeling? And where's it coming from? And why is it here? And then what do I need to do about it? And again, all of that can happen in real time. And I kind of had to go through that. And I think when you're in healthy relationships, they just let you do that, whether they participate or not, and whether you want the participation or not is, the sort of details of your dynamic. But all in all, we're going to process things. We're going to process triggers, wounds, whatever in relationships. It's just how that goes. And healthy relationships allow for that. They hold space for that. They actually, encourage that, because the more you clear those things out in real time, the less they hold you or affect you in any way forever. And so, emotional mastery is going to happen mostly in real time. Again, you can certainly do your practices and, you can clear out a lot of your triggers and identify your wounds and all of that stuff, which is going to absolutely support your emotional mastery. But the top layer of it has to happen in real time, when you're triggered, when you have to actually master yourself in the moment, and not just when have the safety of your own solitude. So when we think about emotional mastery, we're thinking about how we relate to reality, how we're relating to the present moment, how we're relating to ourself, our current experience, and knowing that our current experience is always different. Moment to moment to moment, we're showing up in a different experience. And so we are, ultimately, fundamentally, never the exact same person, right? Because our mental state is changing, our minds are changing, our beliefs are changing, our physical body is changing all the time. And so, emotions come, they're heavy and they're present, they take over and they're strong, but they're temporary. They're very much temporary, and they're very much a mirror, or at least a pathway, a looking glass into yourself. Because if someone says something and it makes you feel a certain way, there's information for you there. And again, this isn't good or bad, because sometimes you say someone says something and you feel so inspired by it, right? You're you want to just go out and live your best life. That's one side of it. The other side of it, someone says something and you're totally triggered, so totally pissed, offended or whatever it is. And that's also yours to look at and to be with. Because again, of course, people will say offensive things, and what will offend one will not offend another, which is why it's obvious that the offendee is the one who has the issue, right? And so if we can own this, if we can take more ownership over our own emotional state, then we project it much less. And I think there's far too much of that happening in our society right now. The projection of unaddressed, unchecked emotional baggage, ultimately, and we're having these major high-level conversations in society, and people are fighting from emotional state to emotional state, and nothing is getting done. Because when your identity is founded on an experience of yours, or when your identity is founded on something that even provokes an emotional state for you, that's something you like have to defend, it's going to create such a different conversation than when you just know yourself and you know that emotions come and they go, and they're not totally, they don't identify who you are. And so there's a lot of nuance here. There's a lot of work to be done in taking ownership over this. I think a core piece of self-mastery is emotional mastery / emotional accountability. We really have to take accountability for our own emotional state. And we have to stop saying, you are the bad guy who made me feel this way. And instead we have to look at, why do I feel this way? What are they making me feel? And where is it coming from when the person right next to them heard what they said too, and they didn't budge at all, right? There's no response whatsoever, because it's our own stuff coming up. So, again, circling back to the idea of women, especially because women shift and change emotionally, and we're in different states, meeting yourself where you are. You don't got to rush out of what I call them the depths. I like the term the depths, because it's not dark. It's not bad, like scary, and I'm mean and cruel and nobody should come near me. I'm just quiet. Like I'm kind of to myself. I'll get kind of like and I feel almost even more peaceful, but I'm like, I don't really want to talk to anybody. I just want to like have some time to myself, and I don't want to, I might try to keep myself home those days or whatever it is, because I'm just the space that I'm in. And it's nice, usually that kind of turns me into more inner work, or I just connect with God in a different way on those days, or I journal, or, I'm kind of processing my emotional state without projecting it. And I'm aware that it's there. And I'm aware that if somebody came into my emotional state, I wouldn't be my best self, or I might even relate with them in a different way that they wouldn't need to participate in. So I'm just going to keep to myself on those days. And those days are pretty rare. For me, it's definitely relatively cyclical. But I think the number one is self-awareness, being really aware of your emotional state and how it changes and shifts, and where it's coming up with other people. Again, that's why healthy relationships, what a powerful space to really do your work and to really own and take accountability over the emotions that take hold over you at certain points, given context or what someone said, or, whatever it is, what someone has made you feel. So we're looking at all of it. You have to be willing to look at all of it. You have to be willing to take accountability. That's so key. And once you do all of that, then you go out in real time and you're a lot more present with it, right? You're witnessing the shifts and the changes. You're kind of addressing them internally as they come, like, oh, they said something that pinged me, and it made me sit up a little straighter, or whatever it is. And so then what is it? I'm going to sit with it, because where is it coming from? Why is it bothering me? What is, what's my root from that? So there's always mirrors. Your world is always holding up mirrors for you to see yourself, for you to take accountability over your emotional state. But I think it's key that we do. I think it's really time that all people take accountability, take ownership over their emotional state, take on emotional mastery. Because again, if you're out in the world just on Twitter, constantly projecting in people's comments about like saying hateful stuff, or somebody's saying something, you're obviously triggered. This is obviously your own stuff that you're projecting onto someone else in the comment section. I feel like the comment section is such a great place to identify not emotional mastery, because so many people just in their anonymous accounts go there and just flame everybody because they can't control themselves. And that's what it is, right? There's so many people can't control themselves in so many different ways, and they cause significant harm to other people because they haven't sat with themselves. Anybody who causes these mass shootings or these massive atrocities, it's like they're so far away from themselves. It's been the accumulation of all of the things that I'm describing without having ever looked at it or sat with it or wondered where it came from. Suddenly you're not even yourself. You're not even in your body. You're like totally disconnected from truth in your inherent divinity and yourself. And so you're living out this just, out of body, non-truth experience, and you're causing harm to all these other people because you haven't done your work. And so this is why I think this is such a key concept in the future of humanity and in the new paradigm, is all of us taking accountability and ownership over our own emotionality. You know, another place where this comes in, if we're being really honest, is in the trans conversation. You know, there's a lot of fragility in that conversation. And if you've noticed, I really don't talk about it much. I haven't really given my perspective on it. And part of that is because, you know, it's like you say one sort of wrong thing that community does not agree with, and you're going to get blown up and called every name, and you're all of a sudden this horrible person for having an opinion, you know. And there's a lot, and that to me is fragility. It says to me that this is not like a founded based conversation where, you know, we can disagree or feel differently about it and still arrive at like a conclusion, and or at least agree to disagree. If it's like that fragile, if there's so many eggshells, like to me, the problem lays on the end of the eggshells. If your whole life is just a ticking time bomb for you to go off, like, you've got to look at that. That's yours. It really is yours. And there's not enough accountability and ownership there for me to even want to enter the conversation, because, you know, I'm going to look like a bad guy for having an opinion. And, you know, and that's one example of, you know, a current affair that there's so much fragility in, but really in all of them, for being honest, far too much fragility in all of the current affair conversations. So very little can get done because we're too busy tiptoeing around the landmine of other people's emotions. And, you know, the future generations can't afford that. They really can't. We can't afford to be tiptoeing in these very powerful, necessary conversations. We have to be able to show up fully with all various perspectives and opinions and discuss them and find perhaps a meeting ground if we're ever going to find any type of solution to anything. And if we don't, then we just end up at this muddled mess at war. And it doesn't have to be war. You know, the difference of opinion exists for a reason. Diversity in thought exists for a reason, because the whole ecosystem of humanity relies on diversity. And so we all come in with our different experiences and our different perspectives and our different ways of doing things. And if you are so held so tightly to your own that you don't even let someone else's exist, you have to make them the bad guy for even existing in a way that you don't, then how will anyone ever win? No one can ever win if they're fighting up against your emotional reactivity. That's yours to handle first, and then get in the conversation. So that's, to me, again, though, just like the whole state of America, especially right now, is such a fragile place. It's so fragile. You say one wrong thing, you make one wrong move, and you're whatever they want to call you, or you're the bad guy, or you're this heinous person because, you know, you hold traditional values. You prioritize the family unit, you know, whatever it is, you're the bad guy. And so to me, this shows why emotional mastery is so necessary now more than ever. And I do believe that when people take on that and take a little bit more ownership over their own experience, that they're not flaming everybody just for having a difference of opinion, we'll live in a much more harmonious world, right? Emotions run the show so much, because for those of us who are maybe more peaceful or don't have that kind of fragility, then, you know, we kind of, in many ways, society will box you out because you don't want to deal with the fragile. Or if you do, you just have to be willing to get all the death threats and all the, you know, the crazy things that happen in those spaces, which, you know, to me it's very rarely worth it. So emotional mastery is absolutely a superpower. It is going to take you so far when you can identify your emotional state, when you can be with it and respect it and honor it, identify where it's coming from. And usually over time, as you do more and more of this, you become more even in just your home frequency. You fluctuate less, you know, you don't need the same kind of defense mechanisms and other things to just be allowing of your fluidity. And also, though, you know how to get home. You know how to get home. Whenever you separate, or you feel that moment of like feeling triggered, or I like to call it activated instead, you can meet that and use it in a way that's maybe actually beneficial. And if you can't use it in the moment in a way that's beneficial, maybe you put it in your back pocket for later, for you to look at it later, because you can't always do all of this in that exact moment, right? Say you're with a boss and they've said something offensive. You can't obviously give me a minute, boss. I need to process this. I mean, if you have an amazing boss, like, do that. But a lot of times, realistically speaking, you got to kind of look at things later. And I hope that you do. You know, it's a major piece of it. Is like, God, I was really triggered by that today. I want to take that and write about it later, see where that's coming from. Why did that, you know, bother me so much? This person said something, this person looked at me wrong, this person, X, Y, and Z, whatever they did that made me feel a certain way. We're going to look at what, how we feel so that that doesn't happen again. Because anytime someone can say one thing and it take you out of your peace, you're giving your power away. You're giving your power away. That's why emotional mastery is a superpower, because if you can maintain your sovereignty in your space and someone could say anything and say, it's not going to affect you. If something kind of comes up a little bit, you probably will look at it, and or if it needs to be addressed, you can do that too in a way that's healthy and not raging. But there's so many layers to emotional mastery that will maintain you in your power, all in all. So I think that's the arrow that points us towards self-mastery in this, is that if you really want to keep your power, you have to be able to base yourself in your own experience, knowing that it's going to flow and ebb and shift and change, and that you can meet all of those areas and still stay yourself. And when you need to come home to yourself, you know how to get there. When you need to address things, you know how to do that in a way that's healthy and helpful. And when you can process things in real time and nix things that aren't working for you, or identify why you feel a certain way, then you can do that too. So it's present moment awareness first and foremost, self-awareness first and foremost. And then beyond that, it's letting yourself notice how you react and relate to things as you go, people, situations, environments, news, whatever, movies, whatever it is. So that way, you're using everything that life gives you to sharpen yourself into the person who becomes ultimately untouchable. Because once you get to that power where very few thing that anybody can say or do is going to take you out of yourself, that's to me, that's when you've really mastered something. I'm not there. So I wouldn't know, but it definitely sounds good. So I'm gonna leave us there today. Again, another major topic that I could go on forever about, obviously, but I will circle back to this down the road a little bit because I love this topic, and I really think that this is an antidote in not an unwell society. So let's keep talking about this. Please ask questions, think about this, process it, practice it in real time. I'm gonna do the same, and I'll see you next time. Much love, everyone.